What's up, Wolfpack? Woo! I'm excited about today. Told you guys in a few videos back that we were gonna start doing some tutorials, and today is one of those tutorials. We're talking today about how to improve your Instagram photos by adding a matte fade in Lightroom. All right, let's jump into the tutorial today, how to get that matte faded look on your photos. I've selected my photo. This is actually a photo that we used for our merch promotion, so link in the description, go check it out. And I'm gonna walk you guys through how I run Lightroom. You guys can use Lightroom however you want, but I pretty much start Lightroom how they have it laid out. And typically I would start with white balance. I'm gonna leave white balance the way it is. I like the way it looks, so we're gonna leave that alone. But we're gonna jump down here to exposure, and I know I'm increasing the overall universal exposure, but I wanna go ahead and do that in this photo. We're gonna bump it up to about 0.35. Let's do that. And that looks good. And then we're gonna go down to contrast, and we're gonna bump up the contrast quite a bit. And the reason I'm doing that is because I really want to get these edges. The subject is all in black, so I really wanted to find these edges, because whenever we go to fade the blacks in here, we're gonna lose some of the contrast in there. So we wanna bump up the contrast quite a bit, and that looks pretty good right now. We're gonna go down to highlights. We're gonna drop the highlights down pretty low, probably about right in there. And then we're gonna increase the shadows, because our subject is in black. We wanna increase the shadows to where we can really see the subject, and maybe even a little bit more. That's probably good right there. And then we're gonna go down to the whites, and we're gonna hold Alt on the keyboard, and then we're gonna drag this over up until we see like a dot or two. The more you bring this up, the more white space you're gonna see. We don't wanna do that. That's gonna become blown out. And I actually wanna increase this right before we see any dots. So probably like 2. We're gonna leave that where it is. We're going to lower the blacks. That is basically doing the same thing that contrast is doing. We're defining those edges, so we want to get a little bit more in there. And then same thing with clarity. It really is doing the exact same thing that contrast is doing, but yet popping out a little bit more sharpness in the photo. So we're gonna increase that, maybe not so much, there we go, bring it down. We're gonna leave vibrance alone, and then we're gonna come down to saturation. And I wanna bring down the saturation because I don't want there to be a whole lot of color in this photo. I really want it to be pretty faded looking, even in the color. So we're gonna bring that down probably to about -30. That looks pretty good right there. So then we're gonna get into tone curve, and this is where really all the magic happens. This is where we start to get that faded look. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna add a point right here in the middle. That's gonna add a point, and then we're gonna come down here to the blacks, and we're gonna bring this up, and you start to see the fade in the photo. So that's looking pretty good. We're gonna raise it up to about, let's say 27 or so. That looks pretty good right there. So with that, we've kind of washed out some of our photo. We don't want that. So this point that we added earlier, we're going to bring this down. We're gonna drag it over to about right in there. And then we're gonna bring it down, and we're gonna bring down some of the midtones. We're gonna darken it and make some of that pop out so that it's not looking so washed out. So it's looking pretty good so far. There are some details that I still wanna fine tune. We'll get to that in a second, but I wanna work on the color a little bit more because there's still some distracting areas, such as this greenish yellow area right here. I still want to desaturate that a little bit. It's distracting to my eyes. So I'm gonna come down here to saturation, and we're gonna click on the yellow area, bring that down, see what it does. And that's looking pretty good. I want a little bit in there, but not a whole lot. I don't want it to look black and white, but I don't want it standing out so much. We're gonna come down to the green because there is still some green over here that's catching my eye that I don't really like. We're gonna bring it down, maybe not as much as the yellows, but we're gonna bring it down to about right there. And then I see this orange over here, which is really distracting me, or red, whatever that is. And we're gonna bring that down, and that's looking pretty good right there. So So another thing, this lens that I was using the 24mm 2.8, which does have a little bit of lens aberration. And so we want to fix that by bringing down the blues to actually make the gray a little bit grayer. Now another thing we're gonna do, we're gonna add in some vignetting. Yes, vignetting, it's the way I roll. So we're gonna bring it down and we are going to make it pretty stark because I still want that vintage faded look. So we're gonna bring it down quite a bit and then we're gonna bring the midpoint up to about 60. And that's looking pretty good so far. I like it, but our subject is still not in the highlight. So we wanna make the highlight stand out and we're gonna come up here to our radial tool and we're gonna drag this across to about the width and height of our subject where we want it. And I don't really care so much about the legs. I really don't want to get into the water area because that will bring out the highlights that I don't want. And we can turn this a little bit to where she fits in to the radius. And that's about perfect right there. And so if we come up here to exposure and bring this up, you'll see that it's exposing the outer areas. We don't want that. What we want is we're going to come down to invert, and we're going to invert that. And when we do, we're gonna bring up the exposure just a little bit, probably about right there, and then we're gonna bring out the shadows a little bit. And you can see how she's highlighted a little bit more, and we can add in just a little bit more clarity if we want. And that's looking pretty good. I like it. So we can see the before and after, what we created. That's before, and this is after. Now every photo is gonna be totally different. You have to tweak things how you want. You could use a LUT for this, but this is how you do it manually. Guys, if you like this video today, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, share it, all that good stuff. We'll see you guys later.